Hello, and welcome back to today's podcast. Thank you very much for being here. All right, let's talk about making this so hard. And I have talked to several people in the last week that, they have to wait a while to get to me because I'm booked out 3 months as of right now. And so people are having to wait. And by the time they read the book and they have a meeting with me, some of them are forgetting what the book said. But I am finding just this common theme in the last week of so many questions about how it works and does it work differently for me if I am, starting a business or if I'm buying a vehicle, or does it work different if I am tithing or whatever the question might be with the policy. And one of my clients, Nate, he's a huge thinker and he thinks all the time. I was thinking. And he called me one day after about 3 years of having his policy. He called me and said, "You know what? This is really easy when you quit making it so hard." And that is like the best explanation I've ever heard, because we want to make it hard. We want to make it about a rate of return. We want to make it fit our narrative only, when it is called the infinite banking concept, because the ideas of what you can do with it are absolutely infinite. And we are so put into a box of thinking that we can't even fathom what else we could do with it besides what I put in my book or what Nelson puts in his book. And so if you are using money for something, that money could very easily go through the policy first. And I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they were like, "Well, should we start the policy after she buys cows? Should we start the policy after?" So they're saying, should we buy cows with cash? And I said, it doesn't matter if she's buying a house, because the other question was, should we buy cows with cash and save the rest of the money for a down payment on a house? It doesn't matter if we're buying cows or if we're buying a house. Or the question was, or should she use a policy to buy a car? Those are three different options of using a policy. And it doesn't frankly matter which option you choose. So if she wants to buy cows with cash, then the cash is in the cattle, right? And so now when she goes to buy a house, the house might have to wait until all of that loan is paid back. So it might be 5 years and then she'll have the money for the down payment on the house. Well, what if she needs a car? Same exact thing. If we use the money for the cattle because that's what we want to do today, and we want to do that in the next month, then buy the cattle. And then if you're paying it back, we will have the money for the car. We will have the money for the house. And so many people just don't get it. Like, I talked to somebody yesterday, as I'm recording, it was yesterday, and they said, well, we don't want to use the money for the farm. We want to use it for the off the farm business, because they have several businesses. One, they make clothing, and she's a graphic artist and she has a marketing business, and sounds like they want some rental properties. So they're saying we want to use that money for those things, not the farm, because we'll probably never be able to farm without the bank. But it doesn't matter. It's one pool of money. If they don't need their money for the farm, then they get to use it for the clothing business and they get to buy inventory. They get to use it for a down payment on a house. And so even though I'm using farm examples here, get past the fact that it's a farm. It frankly does not matter if you have a farm or not, which so many people on this podcast say, well, I can't listen to your Farming Without the Bank podcast because I don't farm. But it does not matter if you farm or not, because of the fact that the concept is infinite and you have one pool of money. You get to decide if you're going to start a business with that pool of money, or if you're going to buy a rental property, or if you're going to donate that money, if you're going to tithe that money, it ultimately does not matter. And so if we're going to use our policy, for example, tithing, I got that email. How can I use my policy for tithing? The same way that you use your policy to buy a vehicle or to borrow money for the kids' college. Those things are all the same. So I also had somebody this week say, if I want tuition for the kids' college, should I be buying a policy on each one of the kids? You can, or you can buy a policy just on yourself and we can borrow the money to pay for the kids' college. And then we pay that back, and either you have them pay that back to you or you can pay that back over your lifetime, however you want to do that. If you have a policy on each for each one of the kids, then great, borrow it from that policy and they can pay that back. But we are compartmentalizing our money. And if you've read my book, I talk about don't compartmentalize your money. It does not matter if we have $50,000 of cash value, if we need that for tires, if we need that for vacation, if we need that to tithe, if we need that for a vehicle, a down payment on a house. It works the same for everything. And so many people think, well, before I start the policy, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Like, for example, people will say, well, before I start the policy, I need to pay my taxes. Well, why wouldn't you put the money in the policy and then borrow against it to pay taxes? And then all year, pay your quarterlies back to your policy. That's what I do. I don't give the government money for quarterly taxes. No. I am not going to give them my money every quarter that I can be using in my business for marketing to increase my business. No. They're not paying me interest on my money that they're sitting on all year. Now I have to pay interest to them, and that sucks. And that's why a lot of people give them the money up front, but they do that on purpose. So I'm just going to put the money through my policy and then borrow against my policy to do that. Well, what happens when I pay my first quarter of taxes back to my policy? Now, let's just say I've got $50,000 sitting there. Okay, well, I can use that. I can borrow that $50,000 to market. I sell more policies. I make more money. I put that back in before taxes are due. And so we make this so hard. We want to know about rates of return. I mean, I've had that question a lot lately, and my brain's going to blow up. I'm pretty sure I just did a podcast about this, so I'm not going to rant and rave too much. But I want to know what the rate of return is because I'm comparing it to an IRA. I'm comparing it to a Roth. I'm comparing it to a 401k. You're comparing apples and oranges. You're making it really, really hard when it's very, very simple. And Nelson said it's very simple. But he also said this is a practice of imagination, reason, logic, and prophecy. So if we don't have the imagination piece, that is where we get stumbled up. And we don't have imagination in a lot of aspects because the schools and the jobs and everything else have shut us down, right? We go to school and we're excited about stuff and we have this great imagination. And parents will say, oh gosh, you're just a crazy thinker. The school will shut you down. They don't want imagination. They don't want feedback. And I love the Working Genius personality test. I absolutely love it. And I took that test and I am an imaginary, that is my working genius, is coming up with ideas about stuff, right? I'm an idea person. Every job I ever had, I frustrated the bejesus out of every boss I ever had because they were not an idea person. They didn't want ideas. They didn't want change. They wanted everything to stay the same. And I was the crazy person coming in there. Just shut up, Mary Jo, and do your job. And it was very, very hard for me to do that. And if I would have stayed in those positions, I would have allowed them to kill that for me, right? Maybe. I don't know. I'm pretty strong-headed. But I would have allowed them to kill that for me. I would have been doing stuff that I did not love, stuff I can do, but stuff that I don't love to do. And so when we hear about money and we hear about what we can do with it, we just don't even use our imagination because people, the talking heads of the world, like Dave Ramsey, will tell you to go ahead and get an envelope for every single thing. Okay, Profit First will tell you to go and get a bank account for every single thing. And then those respective bank accounts come in there. And so they're working with people that don't necessarily have imagination, but they're not creating the thought process. No different than when I say, if you want a vehicle, what are you going to do? Are you going to take the $50,000 and go buy a vehicle with cash? Or could you take that $50,000, buy a rental property, or start a business with that would create cash flow to pay for your vehicle? People don't think like that, right? People are like, oh, I just talked to this couple yesterday. I said, okay, so if you're going to buy a vehicle, you may want to go to the bank and borrow money for that vehicle and then use the money to create income that pays for the vehicle. If you are entrepreneurial, why not? So people will say, well, I can't afford to start the business because I spent it all on my vehicle and I really needed a vehicle. But you could have did both if we had imagination. And so the policy can be used for so many things and multiple things. We just have to really understand how to do that. And that it does take time. It takes a lot of my clients 2 or 3 years just to get that going. And then other clients just get it right away. But those of us that our imagination has been killed, we don't even understand how to think differently. But stop making it so hard when it's really, really simple. Because we're complicating it with a lot of things that we're hearing, and it's just not complicated. It's just very simple. We buy a policy, we pay our premium, we borrow cash value, we pay cash value back. It is no different what we're doing with our policy than if we go to the bank and borrow money and pay it back. It's the exact same thing. And that's not hard for us. So we're making this more difficult by saying, oh, is it an investment? And it's not an investment. It is a life insurance policy. So stop making it an investment. So anywho, hopefully that helps. And hopefully those examples help a little bit because it can be used for infinite things. If you have questions, comments, concerns, you can email me, MaryJo@withoutthebank, or you can go to themjhotline.com. People have been using that, so I love it. themjhotline.com, and you can leave me a message through that. And if you have questions, if you have ideas for podcasts, whatever, I'm open to all of them. But thank you for listening, and you have a fantastic rest of your day.